California has the most uninsured drivers in America, and it's not just because we have the most people, and it's not just because we have a high cost of living. I think it's on purpose. I think the legislators that we all voted into state assembly took a look at the specifics of our state and decided that we're okay with 1 in 5 cars on our roads being uninsured. And to prove my point, I'll show you 3 ways California has built an insurance system that makes the choice to go uninsured not only a decent financial decision, but so inconsequential of a penalty that most people just don't have to bother. Which means that those drivers going around without insurance aren't evil or lazy or the scum of society. They're actually just kind of following the best path put forward for them. Here's what I mean. Reason 1, only the cops check for insurance and the fines can be tiny. So earlier this year, my wife's car was hit while parked on the street in front of her house. The guy left no insurance, but we got his plates from a neighbor's camera. The cops go give him a house call. The driver is a 71-year-old guy with a busted 1990 Lincoln Continental out front. He gave the officer a USAA policy number, and as the officer is on the phone giving me this information, he straight up says, "I have no idea if this is a real policy number, but this is what he gave me. Pass that on to your insurance." Of course, my insurance says that policy hasn't been active for years. Now, I never talked to that driver, but his story is probably pretty easy to guess, and I think it's a story most uninsured drivers probably have. Situation changes, money gets tight, and car insurance is one of the first things to go. I had no appetite to press charges on the guy for driving without insurance. The officer obviously wasn't going to go back and hand him a fine, and in general, California agrees that we don't want to tack on fees for breaking the laws that are obviously the result of not being able to afford stuff. Outside of needing to provide your car insurance to the DMV when you actually get your driver's license, the only other time you're showing the government your car insurance is if you get pulled over or in an accident. And even if you do get pulled over, the fee for not having insurance is $100 to $200 the first time and $200 to $500 each time after that. Now compare that to the 2025 average premium for minimum liability in California of right around $100 a month. Financially, that decision is kind of clear. So if I'm facing a tough time and all I've got to do is go 2 months without getting pulled over to financially break even, some pretty good odds. All right, reason 2, no pay, no play, still lots of play. Quick moral predicament. If someone is uninsured and gets hit by someone that is insured, should the uninsured person get paid by the insured person's liability coverage even though they don't participate in the insurance system themselves? Well, in 1996, California passed legislation to be one of the first states to actually say no, uninsured drivers should not be able to get that compensation. They called it no pay, no play. 4 out of 10 wordplay. The goal was to encourage drivers to get insured because otherwise they wouldn't get made whole minus a few exceptions. But listen to the exceptions. They wouldn't let uninsured drivers get compensation except for property damage to their car. And of course, the medical bills because you don't want to ruin someone's life. And if it's a big accident and they just can't work because of their injuries, a setback like that would really mess with someone's family, so let's get them paid for missed work too. No pay, no play sounds like a tough reform for a broken system, but it only prevents uninsured drivers from claiming non-economic damages, which in practice ends up just being pain and suffering. For most accidents, pain and suffering is actually pretty minimal, less than $10,000, and unless your life was absolutely ruined by this crash, in which case your life has already been ruined by this crash, not having been insured and missing out on pain and suffering is probably some of the least of your problems. And I want to be clear here, I'm not advocating stiffing uninsured drivers. If instead I hit the 71-year-old veteran in the 1990 Lincoln Continental, I would want my insurance to pay for their car and their hospital bills. That's what I pay my insurance for. But it's also true that no pay, no play legislation, one of the only actions California has made to reduce uninsured driving, is not materially convincing uninsured drivers to pay for insurance. Reason 3, uninsured drivers hurt themselves, not others. California uses uninsured motorists and underinsured motorist coverage to protect its roads from uninsured drivers. This coverage mechanism is what can morally relieve drivers who are choosing whether or not to drive without insurance. The justification is that if everyone else is supposed to have UM/UIM insurance, then I don't need to have liability insurance. With the way California has set up their coverages, if everyone does what California intends, the only way people really get screwed over is if an uninsured person gets hit by an uninsured person. Therefore, uninsured drivers can only really hurt themselves. This is, of course, under the understanding that if you have minimum liability insurance or any car insurance at all, you are supposed to get UM/UIM insurance. It is part of being on the roads in California. It is a part of the intended system that they've built. And we know that California is okay with this system because of two very specific clues. One, they didn't increase minimum liability for 30 years. And two, when they increased that minimum liability, finally this year in 2025, it's way below the average minimum liability. Virginia and North Carolina both increased their minimum liability in 2025, but they moved theirs to a much healthier 50-150, and ours is still 30-60-15. So this system where people who can afford car insurance also need to pay for uninsured/underinsured motorist coverage, which is effectively paying for the liability insurance of people who do not have income or assets worth going after in court, is implicitly signed and approved of by state legislature in California as recently as this year. And this kind of gets to the real secret bonus reason why I think so many uninsured drivers are driving around California that truly no one ever talks about. Secret bonus reason. I think the reason there's so many uninsured people on our roads is because Californians are totally fine with uninsured people driving on our roads. The steps we'd have to take to penalize people for uninsured driving, the negative effects that would have on those people's lives, are just not in the appetite of a majority of Californians. To Californians, not being able to afford car insurance isn't a crime, and we're all largely okay with picking up that extra tab. For now. Because if we weren't, we wouldn't vote for the state reps and senators that we send up to Sacramento. Or we'd pass one of those props that pop up in an election year to get whatever rule we need on the books to decrease uninsured driving, but we don't. Instead, let's focus on improving transportation infrastructure so fewer of us have to drive at all, decreasing wealth inequality by taxing billionaires and corporations so more people can actually afford their policies, and focus on reducing fraud in our insurance system so everyone's premiums can go down while car insurance companies still make their 1 to 4% profit margin. Alright, special note for uninsured drivers that want to be insured. California has the CLCA, California Low Cost Auto, for families that want to be legally compliant with liability minimums. It's an auto plan that's still backed by private auto insurance companies, but for lower liability coverage maximums and lower premium prices. In my county of San Diego, a family of 5 can get covered for $272 a year this year if your income is below $94,000. The CLCA is in of itself proof that California wants to prioritize getting people on the roads committing economic activity above making sure everyone is perfectly covered. Pretty much anybody that has a car and needs to get to work should be able to afford plans on the CLCA, which means that hypothetically, we should be able to get the uninsured driving rate pretty close to zero. But you know, the paperwork, and as we already covered, it's a lot of work for a system that has a coverage that's supposed to fix uninsured driving. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. We founded Blueberry Insurance Agency with the goal of educating people on the truth behind important insurance topics and conversations just like this one. I'm sure there's lots of people who will disagree with some of my opinions on here, and opening up that conversation to talk about them is great. We believe that the more everyone cares about and learns about insurance, the better insurance gets for everyone. We have a link to our free coverage quiz in the description below. It'll let you know if you have the best coverage amounts for your situation, and if you'd like to get insurance with us and you live in California, then you can do that at the end of the quiz. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.